The views and opinions expressed on this podcast is not a direct reflection of the host and his guest's current or previous employers. The topics and hot takes discussed are meant to create conversations while offering a different perspective to current issues in the strength and conditioning industry. The opinions shared on this podcast are not meant to demean or offend anyone. However, as my grandfather used to say, a hit dog will holler. Thank you and enjoy the show. This podcast is sponsored by Simply Faster. Simply Faster is an educational resource and an open platform for coaches to share best practices and firsthand insights while providing peerless technology, equipment, and service. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Season 1, Episode 7. Today, as usual, I got another special guest. This is somebody I'm very proud of, somebody that in this profession has just grown over time. And so I'm not going to take up, his intro time. I'm gonna let this young man introduce himself, tell you, his experiences, where he's at and what he's doing. And we'll just go from there. So Coach, go ahead, take it away.
All right, man. Thank you for having me. My name is Christian Hosley. I am a strength coach at Texas Tech University. I'm the assistant strength and conditioning coach for men's basketball. Previously, before this, I was actually at my old high school, Randolph High School, where I was the strength and conditioning coordinator, and I'm just glad to be here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so, one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on is because I feel like there's a lot of strength coaches out there that are at the high school level, maybe wanting to go to the collegiate level, or maybe they're at the collegiate level and they're kind of getting burnt out, getting tired, and they're maybe wanting to transition to the high school level. So I figured what better guest than to have somebody that has experience in both. And so what I wanted to start off is just talking about your experience as a high school strength coach and how that prepared you for, your current job as a collegiate strength coach.
Absolutely. Through high school strength and conditioning, it really helped me to go back to the basics with thinking about, okay, hey, I have middle school athletes, I have high school athletes, but let's say specifically with middle school athletes, it's one of those things that middle schoolers are like a blank canvas. And so that's one area where I can really develop in my coaching and understand like the basics as far as programming and how do I get this little middle schooler to move effectively and making sure that we are trying to get to where we're getting to by making sure we have a program that's really good for their development as well too. And so when I think about how high school has helped me, I think one, with programming, two, with also just understanding how to program with big groups as well too, because if I can program with 72 athletes in a weight room at a time, when I get to college and it's only 15 athletes, that makes things a lot easier to where I can actually give more time to a lot of these athletes as well. So.
For sure. And so now on the other end of the coin, how do you think that, spending at least this past year at the college level, if you were to go back to the high school level, how do you think that, the things that you've learned and your experiences and everything would help you, if you were to go back down to the high school level?
Yeah, I definitely think going to the college level has, one, helped me to see what it looks like in college. And so it kind of gives me the insight for a lot of those high school and middle school athletes who maybe have ambitions for going to that next level to be able to say, hey, this is what we actually do in college, and this is what it actually takes from a effort standpoint and how we're actually developing. And honestly, just with the time that I've been given in the college level, it just kind of helps with confidence as far as my coaching, whether it's understanding how a specific exercise is supposed to look at different levels. I think that's one thing where I could take back to high school and be able to understand, okay, hey, we don't have to rush through anything. We can actually slow cook everything and actually develop from where we are instead of just kind of jump into, let's say, like a complex power clean or something like that. And so just the ability to develop a little bit more properly even at those earlier stages.
Yeah. And, I spent time at the collegiate level before transitioning to high school, and I get people that ask me all the time, like, what's the difference in working in college and high school? And I would tell people, like, programming for high school athletes is easy, right? They don't 100%. Need much, right? I mean, we're talking about just simple and basic movement patterns, teaching them how to squat, teaching them how to hinge, teaching them how to jump and land. I tell people all the time, like, we're not developing our youth like we used to. It's all about skills, putting a ball in their hand, not even practicing, just going and playing in tournaments, playing in games and stuff. And so they're not developing those other skills. And I tell people weightlifting is a skill,
Absolutely.
right? Training and all of those things. And so I tell people that programming for a high school athlete is really easy, whereas for a college athlete, it's a little more complex because you're dealing with essentially a better athlete,
Yes.
right? But not only that, but their needs and their demands are different than your high school athletes because they're in that top percent of athletes who are able to transition to and play at the next level. The other difference is that coaching collegiate athletes is a little bit easier because they're at the college level because they're athletic. Hopefully they want to be there and they have what it takes to be there. Whereas at the high school level, there's a lot of kids that play because their best friends play, because mom and dad make me play. I don't want to say they're not necessarily passionate because you can't really measure somebody's passion for the game. But there definitely are a lot of people that are happy to, they call them ERWs, right? Eat, ride, watch. That's all I want. I'm happy I got a jersey. I'm happy I got a team photo. You got me a couple of shots in the warm-ups, and I'm cool with being on the sideline, and I'm okay with that. And so I think that, there is a distinct difference between high school and college. And, Missy has said it before, like high school strength and conditioning isn't an entry-level job. How would you say, the things that you have done in your career have prepared you for the high school athlete? Because, playing in college, interning, working at the college level, and then private sector, and then doing, high school strength and conditioning, how would you say, or what would you say help prepare you for those high school kids?
I will say, honestly, just the journey of what I've been through. So another thing about me is just coming from a Division III first. I actually played football at Howard Payne University, which was a Division III out in Brownwood, Texas, and then going to UNT. And so when I was at the D3, I was kind of able to see what strength and conditioning wasn't per se.
Correct.
Like, let's say, we would get in the weight room, have a circuit, 8 exercises, hey, boom, everything's 15 reps, knock it out, cool, call it a day. And then transferring to UNT and seeing like what an actual strength and conditioning program looks like, I think that gave me insight on what does true strength development actually look like. Like how, you and me talked about like an annual plan and like making sure we actually have a direction of like what are we actually trying to accomplish during this phase and this phase and this phase. Because, let's say if we were supposed to do like hypertrophy 52 weeks out of the year, that's not going to do anything for the athlete. And so making sure that we actually have like some type of plan that's actually conducive to like what the athlete is trying to achieve. I think through my journey from being Division III to going Division I, and then also even just coming back to high school and learning through a summer strength and conditioning camp, how do I actually train? Because I'm a strength coach, but I do not know everything. And so a lot of it was trial and error, where it's like, okay, I can see maybe I did a little bit too much for this athlete, or maybe this was just too stressful of an exercise for this athlete right here. And so learning those things and making sure, like, I think one of my favorite books is Atomic Habits. One thing in there is like, hey, don't miss twice. And so like, even when I'm coaching, if I recognize something that wasn't working the best, I'm a coach where I don't want to miss twice. So like, let me actually make that change.
And one thing you said that I really loved was the trial and error. I think that a lot of times strength coaches, when they're programming or they're planning, they feel as if what they're doing like has to work and be effective. But in reality, you don't. You have an idea of what it should look like and how it should go. But we're talking about high school, right? It sounds great to break your groups up into no more than 4 or 5 kids per group, and then all of a sudden, you get an extra team thrown in there, or this team doesn't want to commit to the same amount of days. So you combine groups. And so you have to adjust. But like you were saying, like, don't miss twice. Yeah, you have a plan. Hey, this is what we're doing for speed training. We're going to organize it in this way. We're going to execute these drills. And then all of a sudden, oh, by the way, somebody else is running the camp and they're taking up the turf field, so you can't use the field. So now you got to pivot, right? But not only that, okay, that you can't have access to that field, so you have to come up with another solution to that problem. But let's say you're executing a drill and it doesn't flow properly, right? This is supposed to take us 10 minutes, and for whatever reason, it took us 12, which cuts into the next drill, which cuts into the next. So now that 60 minutes I have to train is come up to like 65, 66 minutes, and it's not a big deal until you're talking about high school athletes where mom and dad are out in the parking lot waiting. You told me we're going to be done by 11. It's 11:05. Where my kid at? Right? It's time to go. And so I think that, it's okay to fail. Just don't make that mistake twice. Learn from your mistake and then learn from other people's mistakes because, as a strength coach, and I talked about on the last episode, having a circle of coaches, having a circle of friends that you can bounce ideas off of, it doesn't make sense for you to walk into a trap that I've already walked into. It doesn't make sense for you to make the mistake that I made after talking to me and knowing, hey, we're talking about logistics, we're talking about numbers, we're talking about organization. This is what I fell victim to. Right? It doesn't make sense for you to then turn around and try to, well, you didn't know what you was doing, so I'm finna, right? And so I think it's okay as a strength coach to try new things. I know for myself, summertime is a time when I try new things, right? In season, which for me is like during the school year, right? We got to be on point. And I tell people, like, for me, my summer program, we do a lot of unilateral stuff, whether it's single leg, single arm. We do a lot of multi-directional stuff, things that we didn't do during the school year. It gives me an opportunity to see how it works because ultimately, yes, strength training is important in the summertime, but also building that base as far as like football, volleyball, those fall sports that start as soon as school does or before school does. Building that conditioning is more important than necessarily making huge strength gains, right? And so to any coach out there, like, don't be afraid to try something new. Just make sure that, like he said, don't fail twice, right? One thing that I've watched and seen from afar is, the NIL and, just having new kids come in each year, which is kind of similar to your high school where you're going to get freshmen every year. And those freshmen are probably going to be wet behind the ears, never seen a weight, touched a weight, been in a weight room. How has, and again, this is somebody that's coming from high school to college, from your perspective, how has the NIL, the transfer portal from your year at Texas Tech, how has that affected training those athletes? Because it used to be you get a kid as a freshman or maybe you get a JUCO kid and you have them for 2 or 3 years, right? Now you're talking about this kid's been at 2 different schools. He's had 2 different training approaches. He's had 2 different philosophies. He's had 2 different weight rooms. Now he's coming to Tech and y'all are doing something completely different. How do you handle those kids, coaching them, getting them ingrained and bought into your culture, especially knowing that this kid might be gone at the end of the school year?
Yeah, that's the big topic nowadays, right? We have guys who may be there for a year, may have a guy there for 2 years. I think the biggest thing is to meet them where they are.
Yeah.
I think one great thing about Coach Wright, who's the head strength coach at Texas Tech University, one thing about, let's say, a transfer, if there's even a guy that they're even thinking about coming to get, as far as our coaches, our basketball staff coaches, Coach Wright will literally reach out to the strength and conditioning coach of the recruit or whatever so that he can make sure, like, hey, let me figure out how much information about this kid. What is he good at? What are some weaknesses of his so that, me as a strength coach, I can come prepared and ready for like whenever this kid does come, if he does come. And so I think that's the preparation part, but also just like understanding, like, we can meet the kid where they are. And so let's say a kid comes in, it's just like anything. You can do a needs analysis and see, like, what are you good at? Are you good at squatting? Are you good at benching? Are you good sitting all the way down in a squat? Are you good at hinging? And honestly, just meeting them where they are. And the thing that I found out with basketball, because, I'm a big football guy, is like, with basketball, as long as you're modifying them, you can really do any movement, but making sure that we're modifying in a way that's not going to overstress the athlete too much. So
Correct. And like you were saying, being a football guy, I know there's high school strength coaches out there right now that are dabbling in, the idea of transitioning to the collegiate level. Being a football guy, what would you say is like the most rewarding or something that you've really enjoyed being basketball? Because,
you're not a hooper,
I mean, I could get down a little bit.
Okay. That's what you are a true football player, because every football player swears they can hoop. But what can you say? Well, let's go back. What was the process like of the idea of leaving the high school ranks to go to college, but not doing football?
Yeah, it was definitely a new norm. I will say this: there was a learning curve for sure. It's like, okay, I'm at a high school where I'm training all the sports. Now, yes, basketball was one of them, but thinking about Randolph is a school where it's a multi-sport school. So kids are encouraged to do basketball, football, volleyball, like multiple sports. And
Yeah.
so is the training going to be specifically tailored to that sport? No, because we have so many kids that we need to get done. And so as long as we're doing the basics, that's pretty much how programming goes in high school.
Yeah.
Going to basketball, it was one of the things it was actually kind of fun because of the fact of like, okay, I'm a coach who loves to learn. I'm a coach who loves to develop as well too, and understanding that I know what strength and conditioning is, but
Yeah.
now I kind of have to earn my check because of the fact of they're basketball players. Most basketball players don't really love the weight room, and so now I get to kind of build more of a buy-in of like, why are we actually in here? Why are we doing what we do and different things like that? And also just learning from Coach Wright. It's one of those things of seeing his programming, seeing why he actually does things, and we actually talk to each other about like different programming, and he gives me feedback on my coaching as well too. And so I'm able to just learn from him and be able to take what I've known from football, but also bring a different kind of energy
Yeah.
to basketball. Because like, let's say for sure, all my athletes at Texas Tech, they know I played football. And so, there might be that kind of stigma of like, oh, I got to challenge him. I got to be that big guy or different things like that. But in a sense, it kind of gives them more of a little bit of a competitive edge because like I might talk mess to them, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, hey, we got to get strong. We got to do this and we got to do that in like a programming of a basketball way. But I kind of bring that like Rory football energy into it to where they're actually still getting something out of it as well too.
For sure. And I think that, for anybody out there at the high school level looking to transition to the collegiate level, it's all about, number one, opportunity, because you can want all you want. Like you can, we're in San Antonio, like I can wish to be a part of, the UT football staff all I want, but like unless they have an opening or an opportunity, that's just me just wishing, you know what I'm saying? But I think that, for you especially, it's like, what are you passionate about? Are you passionate about developing athletes, or are you passionate about football, right? Are you passionate about basketball, or are you passionate about injury prevention? Because it shouldn't matter the sport per se if your passion is in developing in your case, developing young men, right? Developing young men through strength training, right? Injury prevention, things like that. And I think that that's helped you in your transition is not so much like, I'm a football guy. I played football. I love football. I want to work with football. Well, that opportunity didn't come.
Yeah.
The opportunity instead that presented itself was basketball, but you're passionate about the development of athletes and more specifically young men. So it's like, it's an easier transition to make. So for all my high school strength coaches out there, you may not get that collegiate job for that sport or even at that school that you want. Right now, UTSA's got one of the hottest football programs in the state and, potentially in the country. It's a high demand. A lot of people want to work there, but you might have to settle for maybe not even working at UTSA. You may have to settle for, St. Mary's, working with women's soccer, And so I think that for anybody out there, and it should be like in your core and your philosophy. It shouldn't necessarily be, I want to be this specific coach for this specific team. It should be, this is my niche. This is what I enjoy doing. And it can apply to any and everybody, right? Whether you're working at Texas Tech with men's basketball or you're working at Texas Tech with women's soccer, two completely different sports. But I don't think your attitude should necessarily change. I don't think that how you approach the job and how you attack it should change, because your philosophy, your goal is to develop, right? Develop, not be the best sport, strength coach. And so I think that, sometimes a lot of high school guys and girls, they get caught up in the, I want to work at this level, Division I want to work with this specific program. And it's like, yeah, but maybe your opportunity is Division II, or in this case, like you talked about being at Howard Payne, maybe it's Division III, right? I mean, you talk about, walking on being at Howard Payne and then transitioning to UNT. Well, maybe you had to go that route to give you the appreciation, because I think that, especially in high school, a lot of people don't have quality high school strength and conditioning. And I don't want to blame the sport coaches, because you only know what you know, but a lot of high schools don't have full-time strength coaches. So when you talk about just being around a program and developing a program as a coach, it has to be for the overall betterment of the kid, of the athlete, and not for the betterment for the football program, the basketball program. And so I think that's really great. Another thing I wanted to ask you, being at Tech, how has, all of the technology and the equipment and stuff affected your training or your programming? Because I feel like, you're at a Division I Power 5 school. I'm sure there's things that y'all wish, like, man, we wish we can get this, we wish we can get that. But I'm also sure that y'all don't lack for a lot of things. How has that helped you in your growth? Because I feel like I can say for me, we got Rat Coach, for our software, for our, our workouts and things. And I was old school. I'm Excel, printing out sheets weekly, sometimes monthly, workout cards and stuff like that. And then we got Rat Coach and everything is online. And I kind of gotten lazy in my programming. I know what I want to do and it's all written out, but like, I can show up to work and within 2 seconds, boom, 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 I've modified their workout for the day. Whereas with a workout card, I'm sitting there, I'm going over it, making sure there's no typos and stuff. So how has like going from a 3A high school or just a high school level to the collegiate level and having access to all of these things, how has it hurt you or even helped you in your programming and your development?
Well, I'll start off with this. I'm going to always be a whiteboard coach. I mean, I love to get the expo and just draw something up. And so that is always going to be one of my favorite things to do, is just like, hey, let me just go off the dome and let me just write something up there. But when I think about technology, I think of the technology at Tech as just a tool to help us get to where we need to get to. Now, I'll say this. Being the first year at Tech for myself and Coach Wright, we dived into the technology, but we are not fully immersed into it. So some of the technology that we use at Texas Tech is Connexon, which is like a GPS tracking, kind of similar to Catapult, as far as it tells us the player loads, it tells us acceleration, jumps, exertions, just all types of data on the athletes. We also use the force plates, and force plates and Connexon are probably the two main things that we use. It's actually been pretty fun to use the force plates and just learn about them. At UNT, we actually have a sports scientist that actually comes and helps kind of data mine, or I guess show us what the data actually means from the force plates and all that type of stuff. And so it's like with my programming, especially in the time that we're in right now, it's one of those things where I can actually program something for myself, try it out for the athletes so I can be able to bring it to them next year and different things like that. And so what I'll also do is just kind of implement the force plates and stuff like that so that I can be able to see like, hey, is my force going up? Is my RSI going up, and different things like that, to see like, okay, what is my programming actually doing for me? Do I need to kind of ramp up the intensity? Do I need to go down on the intensity? And so, but as far as the technology, I've always kind of been that person of like, I'm not going to let the technology be everything. And so I don't want to bring out all of this technology for the athletes to be able to be like, okay, I really don't know what this means. So if I can't really coach them on what this actually means, or they don't understand it, it's like I'm not really going to bring too much to it. And so I think one great thing that Coach Wright does at Texas Tech is like he'll actually have like a force plate number leaderboard up on the TV so that the athletes can see like, hey, we're just competing to see who can jump the highest on the force plates and something like that. I think when it comes to the technology for the athletes, we have to take a very simple approach. I'm not going to show them like the full graphs of the force plates and all that type of stuff, because they're going to look at it and be like, okay, what is this?
Yeah, that's what's up.
It's just one of those things of like, how can we get something to where they can actually see that they're progressing and be able to have them fully understand what it means and call it a day.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer, like, what gets measured gets improved. You know, so you talk about power. Well, if you're not measuring power, then how do you know
Yeah.
that you're increasing power, right? Or losing power, right? Especially talk about a sport like basketball that has a long season. Like y'all start, I mean, you're in off season in August, but then all of a sudden October's here and it's preseason and you're playing games and stuff. And then if you're lucky, you're in March Madness. So you're going October all the way through March, and then you get a little bit of time off, and then we're back to the grind in April, right? Talk about your work-life balance, because I think that that's something that I definitely don't miss being at the college level, where, you know, you're the first one at the facility at 5:30 in the morning, and then depending on what teams you have and what day it is, you're there for 10, 11, 12 hours. I mean, you know, when you're at the high school level, school, that first bell rings 7:45 or whatever, and then the last bell rings at 3:30, and it's like you get off work at 4 o'clock, and you're like, what do people do at this time? You know, you're trying to figure out what to do. But then at the college level, it's a little bit more fluid as far as like, hey, you got groups in the morning, groups in the afternoon, groups in the evening, maybe team meetings, right? Like, you're not a basketball coach, but I can imagine that if there's a team meeting at 6 p.m., you're probably there because you're a part of the basketball staff. So can you just tell people like what your experience has been, you know, your work-life balance as far as like going to work, your day-to-day, and then getting off of work? Because I think that that's one thing too that is hard for high school coaches to kind of let go, where it's like, this is my schedule. You know, I'm off for a week for Thanksgiving, 2 weeks for Christmas. Spring break is another week. Summertime we're off, but I'm working a half day Monday through Thursday. Schools close on Friday. College, they don't care about none of that. Like, we don't care about no holidays. We don't care about none of that. So it's like, what's your work-life balance been like in kind of your day-to-day? Take us through, you know, from a preseason, so, you know, August, September, and then take us through like your end season when you're playing games and you're on the road traveling.
For sure. So I will say this, I think my position is so unique just because there's not a lot of my position. And so when you think about Texas Tech, yes, Power 5, we're in the Big 12, there's not a lot of strength and conditioning coaches that have, or head strength coaches that have an assistant as their assistant for strength and conditioning. And so I think U of H has one. I think Texas had one, but other than that, there's not a lot of Power 5s that actually have like a actual assistant strength and conditioning coach there. When I think about the work-life balance, I think it, for my position, which is not the norm for like other schools or maybe a strength coach that has multiple sports, where I just have basketball. And so it's one of those things of, we do have different phases where we're a little bit busier than others. Of course, like let's say in season, we might have, you know, practice in the morning or a lift in the morning, practice right after that. We might have a couple of meetings throughout the day, but other than that, we'll have the busiest time, I would say, of course, is like games. And so, you know, thinking about how many games college players play, we'll usually have 2 games a week. And sometimes we might have a lot of stuff going on throughout the day. Sometimes we might not. But when you're thinking about, let's say, the summertime, that's where we have a little bit more time on our hands, where we might have our guys, and, you know, of course, with certain guidelines and hours on how many hours you can actually use within
Texas
the summertime.
Tech is compliant during the
Yes,
summertime.
yes,
Let me
we
just
are.
say that they are
Yes.
very compliant.
Very compliant, always. So we'll of course stay within the hours, but also understand that basketball is such a long season away right now, is that we don't have to just go for hours and hours and hours. And so it's kind of one of those things of, we can start like an early off season, let's say for the summer, slow cook it, and then, you know, they'll do their hour, maybe hour practice of like some skills training or different things like that. And then, you know, if the guys need to come back throughout the day, they could, but, you know, there might be in the summertime days where we might be done at 1. There might be days where we're done at 4. There might be days where the head coach comes in and like, hey, we need to have meetings on this, or just kind of figure out the structure on how we're going to actually get certain things done. You know, when you think about college as well too, you do have to take into consideration, you know, events that you might have to be at with donors and stuff like that. And so those are also kind of cool things to be a part of. You know, when you look at Texas Tech in Lubbock, Texas, West Texas, it's everybody loves the Red Raiders, whether you're good or not. Like
Yeah.
people are going to show up, and so it's cool to be a part of the Red Raider community and being able to just be a part of that and having everybody like be behind you and like just want to see you win. You know? So
And one thing you said that I really appreciated was that like the season is a long way away and we can afford to slow cook people. I think that that's sometimes what people struggle with is they have this anxiety that like we got to work now and we got to get it now. And it's like, yo, your season doesn't start for 6 months.
Yeah.
Right. And not even touching on like programming, but it's like, why are we conditioning the kids 6 months out? Right. If you're a basketball, you know, that October, November is like kind of the preseason, beginning of the season, like, okay, well, if you're 6 months from that or 5 months from that, like you don't need to be hitting the ground and conditioning, right? And so I think that that's good advice for anybody is just keeping things in perspective that like we have time, right? We can throw it in the crock pot. We can throw it on low and let it go, you know? And so I think that's refreshing to hear because I think as a lot of high school coaches, they feel like there's so much to be done and there's so little time, or that there's so much to be done and it has to be done right away. And if not, then it's either never going to get done or it's not going to get done correctly. And I think that, you're talking about planning and organizing. It's like, okay, well, when do we need to be ready by? Right. And then let's work backwards. And I tell people that's like when I plan and stuff, I work backwards, right? When does our season start? When does the season end? Okay, so this is our playing season, right? If we're talking about basketball, hey, we anticipate going to the tournament. So our season ain't over at the end of the last game. We playing postseason basketball, right? And so it's like, okay, if you know when you start, well, then you know when you need to be ready by. Then you got to figure out, well, what is it that I need to do to get them ready and how long does it take? Because if it's a 2-month process, then obviously if you start in October, then you need to have them boys ready by August, right? And if you need to have them ready by August, then that means June and July, you should probably be preparing them to then turn the heat up once August comes. So I think that, a lot of coaches need to understand that it's a process and it's something that can't be rushed. And as Monty Sparkman says, don't burn the steak, and so, you talked about being in Lubbock, talked about being at Tech. What would you say is kind of similar to like the fandom? Because I feel like if you're at the right high school or if you're in the right city, man, they will shut the town down for that football game. They will pack that home side, or they'll even travel and pack the away side for that volleyball game, that basketball game, that soccer game. What would you say are some similarities from, the college fandom and then even like the high school? Because I feel like we as coaches, like we're focused on our kids, but it hits different when you look up and you can't see an empty seat.
Oh yeah.
It hits different when you're on the road and you're playing a team that's green and gold, but you look and you see black and red in the stands. Like it's a different feeling. So what can you say like the experience is like and the feeling when, whether it's a home game or even away game, similar to those fans that you have and the community support that you have, from high school and college?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you pretty much said it right there. You think about Texas and you think about football, right? You think about high school football, the hype that's around it. I think about like, Friday Night Lights. That's one of my favorite movies ever. And so Texas Tech, I mean, the fan base there is just so loyal, but like they will always show up. So like I remember even the Texas game, our last Texas game. So the first Texas game we beat them at Texas, but the second Texas game we literally had people camping out to go to this game. And so I mean it's just awesome to see like the student section get out there. It's just awesome to see like the hype that's around the games and just the atmosphere, and even just how people will actually travel to go wherever we're going as well too. And so like there will be times where, let's say we went to TCU, like all of our Tech fans are going to be at TCU too, to where they're chanting Texas Tech stuff. And like now the TCU people are trying to be a little bit louder and different things like that. So it's cool to see. And being a football guy and just knowing the football culture, being able to visit like some other like basketball culture cities. So, we played Butler where, I think it was Hoosiers was actually filmed at Butler's Arena, but it was a smaller gym, but the fact of how loud it was, and you could just like really feel the basketball culture that goes through there.
Yeah.
It was just phenomenal to just experience as a whole. So
No, and that's why I'm so glad to have you on here just to speak to those experiences. Because like in my mind, there's somebody out there that's listening to this podcast and they're saying, you know what, I'm going to take that leap of faith and I'm going to transition to the high school, to the college level, right? Or I'm going to pursue that opportunity, and that's what I want. You know, I want to grow high school strength and conditioning, but I want people that are invested in high school strength and conditioning to continue to keep investing and not be halfway in, halfway out, because it's like with anything, you know, if you're doing something and you're doing it with a purpose, then the people are going to reap the benefits of that and they're going to get the best version of you. But if you're doing it with one eye, you know, on an exit, well, then some of the things that you do are probably going to be a little watered down. Like that's just life. You know, if you're dating somebody, but you're still like got eyes for other people, like you're probably not going to be invested in that relationship as much as you should. What would you say, you know, being at Texas Tech and being at the college level, what would you say is the difference in, I don't say the athletes, but like, how can I phrase this? So like you're working with collegiate athletes. What have you noticed about the, you know, freshmen? I'm not sure how many freshmen you have, but what have you noticed about the incoming freshmen or the younger guys coming into the college level? Because I think a lot of people assume that because you're in college, you can skip, you can jump, you can lift. And it's like, yo, some people are able to get to those levels off of God-given ability alone.
Absolutely.
Right? And we're talking about basketball. 7 feet is 7 feet. You can get up and down that court at 7 feet. Somebody gonna give you a scholarship to come play. Doesn't mean you can squat and hinge. So what would you say, you know, you've noticed about these younger athletes at Tech, obviously, as far as their like development when it comes to being able to lift and train and jump and land and all of those other things?
yeah, I would definitely say one main thing that I'm seeing is that, you know, a lot of freshmen these days are not being exposed to the weight room as much as they should be. And it doesn't have to be something to where they're just squatting 500 pounds, bench pressing 400 pounds or whatever. It's more so of like, okay, we can see there wasn't really a developmental process to getting stronger or just learning how to move a little bit better.
Yeah.
And so when I think about, you know, freshmen, I think about today, they're not getting that training age that they need. And so I think it could come from a number of things. It could come from year-round sports not being able to develop in the weight room. It could be just other external factors that have limited them from being able to touch a weight or just learn how to move a little bit better. But there's a certain thing that they're just not getting exposed to a lot of these different movements that they need to be to.
And I think to add to that, I think the other problem is club sports, travel ball. I think there's a lot of people that spend more time shooting and less time lifting, injury prevention, rest, right? And I think in today's club sports, right? So you look at your football, your volleyball, your soccer, you maybe even throw track in there. Football with like 7-on-7, right? Any sport that can have some sort of club season. I think what we're starting to see is the emphasis on skills training as it relates to their sport and not developing.
Let's be sport specific.
And not developing overall athleticism, right? And so it's troubling because it's like, man, you were able to get to this level off of, you know, your raw talent alone, but I shouldn't have to teach you where to set your feet to squat. You know, I shouldn't have to teach you to bend your knees a little bit when you hinge. But like you said, we're seeing that. And, you know, my conspiracy theory is that, you know, our youth, right? You're talking about elementary and even middle school, they're not playing, you know, and they're not active. I mean, I remember being in elementary school and like jumping off the gymnasium and, you know, jumping in the rocks and things like that. And it's like those are developing different movement patterns because you learn really quick when you jump off the gymnasium. If you don't bend them knees, you're going to buckle and you're going to fold over. So it's like you learn those things, but then you take the gymnasiums away from the schools and they're not jumping off of stuff and they're not climbing up things and they're not getting those, different movements that translates to athleticism. And so I think that, people have this misconception that just because they're talented enough to make it to the next level means that they're efficient and proficient movers and that they can execute whether it's a barbell movement or a dumbbell or a kettlebell. And it's like, well, that's not the case. And like you said, a lot of people aren't getting that training prior to getting to the college level. A lot of people are investing in the club and travel ball, and that in turn is making your job a little bit harder, right? And then, like you said, not everybody is invested in the weight room, and nor have they been. And it's like, it's not necessarily the kid's fault. I mean, if I'm a parent and if I'm paying $3,500 for my kid to play basketball, best believe he's going to play basketball. And if somebody comes to me and says, hey, Coach Croc, you should probably not play this summer so you can help your son or daughter get stronger. Well, I paid $3,500 for my son to play 40 games this summer. Unless he get hurt or sick, he's going to play them 40 games because I paid for it. And so I think that that's part of the problem is, just the travel ball and everything, and then just, not having a lack of high school strength coaches. Sure. So to tie into that, what would your message be to the high school strength coaches out there that have high school kids that have aspirations of playing at the next level?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things of we have to, as strength coaches, educate our kids as well. Now, we're not their parents, so we're not able to just tell them, hey, you need to stop playing travel ball. But I think what we can do is just build more of a value within the strength and conditioning program to be able to want the kids to work out, to want them to like actually come in here and give their best effort and different things like that. Because overall, I do believe that there is a imbalance with the sport and the development within the weight room that we kind of need to fix a little bit more of. So like, let's say those year-round sports, we need to kind of decrease that a little bit and kind of put more time into the weight room so that we can, reduce the risk of injury. Because at the end of the day, like something's going to work. And what I mean by that is like, okay, yes, you are spending a lot of time on the court. You are spending a lot of time on the field, and you are getting better. You're able to kind of work on your moves a little bit. That crossover, that jump shot, real nice, but that jump shot ain't going to be nice if you sitting on the sideline because you hurt, because you rolled your ankle, or because you couldn't withstand the demands of the sport. Football is a violent sport. So is it going to be something where a kid needs to be out on the field 5 days a week just doing some skill stuff? Like, no, they need to be developing because they need to have body armor. They need to be able to develop their speed so that, we can take care of hamstrings and different things like that. So,
no, and I think that that's what, definitely when I'm, working with my kids, I always ask them like, hey, who here wants to play at the next level? A lot of times, especially talking about football, you have a lot more hands go up than you anticipate, even though like the actions don't necessarily match what it is that they want to do and accomplish. But, that's one thing I try to think about is like, am I preparing them to be successful at whatever sport they play, right? Again, I try to train to increase athleticism, right? Running, jumping, cutting, landing, those things. So no matter what sport you play, if I can improve those things, I personally feel like I've done my job. And I tell people all the time, like if I can get you stronger, increase your athleticism. So we're talking about being able to jump and land and then jump again, or run, cut, redirect, jump, whatever. If we can improve those skills, then I've done my part. If they can't shoot or catch, that's on you.
That's on you.
Right. We're not dribbling balls in the weight room. We're not throwing footballs in the weight room. We're not kicking soccer balls around. So like those skills, that's up to the sport coach to develop. And, I tell people all the time, and I've told my coaches, strength and conditioning and lifting and training, that is a skill. And I think that, and I don't know how to, but I think that we have to change people's perception that like lifting weights is just lifting weights. There's a skill that comes with that, right? So I think about like golf. Golf doesn't require a whole lot of strength and power if you know how to swing a club, if you know how to position yourself to, cut a ball or whatever the case may be. Like, that's a skill that you learn. If you add strength and power on top of that, that's only going to boost your golf game, right? And I think people can understand that. But when you look at other sports like basketball, it's kind of like, yeah, but like, if you can't shoot, you can't shoot. You know, but it's like, okay, well, maybe he can't shoot because he lacks the muscular endurance. Maybe because he lacks the strength and coordination, right? Those are things we can work on in the weight room, right? And those are skills. And I think that a lot of people either don't get it or don't want to get it, but like strength and conditioning is skill development, right? And I think the other problem is people feel like if I'm not spending time in my sport, shooting, dribbling, whatever, I'm not getting better.
Everything else doesn't matter.
Exactly. Nothing else matters. And it's like, no, it's actually the opposite. Like, if all you're doing is spending time shooting and dribbling, then that's all you're going to get better at. But then, like you said, like that injury prevention. So like, how is shooting going to help prevent turning that ankle over, going to treatment, and being able to play in a couple of days, right? And so to everybody out there, strength and conditioning is skill development.
Absolutely.
It is skill development. And so what are some things that you guys kind of pride yourselves on that you guys do? Because I'm sure there's somebody that's saying, okay, well, this guy's at Texas Tech. He's got great athletes. He probably doesn't have to do much with them. What are some things that you're like, hey, we focus on this or we do that, and this translates to whatever our KPIs are, or just, hey, this helps us stay healthy or this helps us stay strong?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there is anything programming wise that we will like specifically say like this is what we just absolutely pride ourselves in. I mean, we're very simple programmers. Like, you know, we are going to hang clean, we are going to squat, we are going to press, we're going to pull, and so all of those movements are very key. I think the biggest thing that we pride ourselves in as in when I say us, I'm talking about me and Coach Wright. We're big over communicators.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't do the athlete any justice if we're just kind of going through this strength and conditioning program and they don't know why we're doing something. Why are we squatting? Why are we pushing this way? Why are we, you know, doing these curve runs? Why are we doing all of this change of direction? And so I think I've learned a lot from Coach Wright as far as like how do you
Shout out to Coach Wright, man.
Shout out to Coach Wright, man. That's my guy. Just on a standpoint of being able to like get that feedback from the athletes.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if they're not feeling like they're getting better, they're not, that's not going to be able to transfer over into the court. And so, you know, he will literally sit an athlete down like, hey, you know, if it's, let's say it's an athlete that needs to gain weight or something, hey, go grab a peanut butter and jelly, come sit in our office and watch a little TV with us real quick or something. But then we can actually just turn that into like a feedback session. Hey, how'd you feel about the training session that we did today? Hey, let me show you a couple of numbers. In this week, you know, your force plate numbers were down a little bit. Did you do anything a little bit different, or you know, what was going on? You know, hey, actually, you know what, I didn't get that much sleep. I didn't eat that day. So, okay, maybe it was just one of those habit days of like, you know, you might have not treated your body the best on that day. And so just being able to have that feedback and just let the athletes know that we are a resource for them. You know, we are on the same team. And so we're not going to do anything to like harm you. We're here to help you and just help them to understand why we are actually doing what we're doing.
So with all of that, how do you translate that to the high school level, right? So like, how would you say, like, you know, how do you go about having that conversation with those kids? Because we're talking about, these are, you know, 18 to 22-year-olds, right? They're a lot more mature. They're at Tech for a reason because they're skilled enough to play at the highest level. But how do you translate that to the kid that, you know, again, is an ERW, or maybe they're not as talented and maybe won't play, but they do everything you ask them? How do you adapt going from Tech to the high school level? Because I feel like everything you said is spot on and it's great. But again, I just think about the people that are like, oh, well, he's at Texas Tech. Like, he doesn't have the problems or the deficiencies. Like, we got one kid on our team over 6 foot. Everybody in his program is over 6. Like, you know, those naysayers, I guess you could say. So like, how did you translate what you guys do in that regards to the high school level?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, there's a quote out there. It's how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so when I think about, let's say, a strength and conditioning program, I'm always trying to correlate it back to life. You know, I'm not just oh, hey, we're in here lifting weights, we're trying to get better and this and that. Like, okay, yes, we are trying to get better, but we're trying to get better because there's a great value in here that's going to reach you further than just the sport. And
Yeah.
so when I think about our program, let's say for a high school level, I think about, okay, hey, we need everything that we do in here matters. So when we're talking about re-racking the weights, making sure the weight room is presentable, making sure that we have the right intensity, those are all skills that translate into life, whether if it's, hey, put up the racks the way it's supposed to be put up, same thing with cleaning your room. Hey, make sure I'm getting enough intensity that I'm getting the correct stimulus. If I'm not getting better in here, I'm not going to be getting better on the field. And so kind of helping the athletes to understand why we do certain things through communication and how maybe a specific movement can actually correlate to the court. And so let's say, for instance, a lateral lunge, when we're thinking about planning, we need to be able to really plant the way we need to and
Yeah.
be able to react off the ground. And so helping them to understand that we're not just in here just squatting, benching, deadlifting. We're going to be actually moving, doing different movements that are going to help correlate to what we're doing out on the field, out on the court, and then the lessons that we learn in the weight room also correlate to life as well too.
See, and that's big time because I try to pride myself on doing that as well, as far as relating what we do in the weight room, what we do outside to life, right? If I say, hey, you guys got 60 seconds, clean this weight room up. Okay, let's go to work. Ready? We break. 60 seconds goes by. I look up. We still got, we're missing a 5 here. We're missing a clip here. The PVC pipe isn't put back up, right? I normally have some sort of consequence for that because, like in life, what do you do when you go to work and you forget to clock in, right? Or what do you do when you go to work and you forget to log off your computer, right? And you have this super, security that requires you to do these things, and it's like, oh, my bad doesn't cut it.
Yep.
And
Try saying that to your boss. My bad.
my
bad.
I'd be forgetting to log out, and it's a huge security threat. Like, my bad, man, right? And so I do the same thing. I try to relate it to life and break it down to the kids' level, and I think that's what a lot of people have to get good at because this generation. I don't want to sound like the old man, but it's like the younger generation. They have more access to information than, the coaches today. If you're 30, 40 years old, you probably didn't have a cell phone when you're in high school. Mm-hmm. It's 2024. Almost all kids have a cell phone. And, now that we've gone to kind of like online learning, all kids have Chromebooks. Like, we give every student in our school a Chromebook to learn. So they have a device, right, that they can easily go and question the things that you do and go and seek validation for the things that you're doing. So I think that when you're able to break down training and relate it to life, I think you do clear up some of the confusion. I think you create more buy-in, and I think you win kids over because you sound not only knowledgeable, but you understand like this bigger picture, right? Mm-hmm. And so I try to explain to my kids like, hey, look, we're not working out, we're training, right? You go to Gold's Gym, you go to Crunch, you go there to work out. Mm-hmm. When we come in here, we are training because training means we are preparing ourselves for something.
For sure.
Working out just means like we're going in, kind of doing whatever, not necessarily saying that you don't have a purpose, mm-hmm. But in this regards, in this conversation, like,
we have a goal we're getting to.
Exactly. Training is working towards a goal. Working out is literally lifting weights, working out. And so, one of my favorite quotes is I tell people, they're like, man, this is hard. And I'm like, man, life's regrets is hard. You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, coach, this is heavy, man. Regret is heavy, right? But it's real. And, you're telling high school kids, some of them get it, some of them don't. But it's like, man, you over here tripping about 85% for a double on front squat, even though it's your weight. Number one, this is your 85%. It ain't mine. But you're over here tripping, talking about it's heavy. Like, think about when you become an adult and you got $100 and you got 2 bills that cost $100. Mm-hmm. Which one do you pay? Do you pay the cell phone or do you get gas and groceries?
Life is hard.
Life is hard because if you don't pay the cell phone, then you no longer have communication. Now, granted, you can nitpick and say, yeah, but you got Wi-Fi. Okay. So I'll give you a better example. Do you fill your car up or do you get groceries? Because you need gas to get to work. You got to go to work, right? But you got to eat. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I try to relate those things. And I think that, at least at my school, a lot of the kids, they understand it, right? They understand that, like, hey, mom and dad bust their butt and work. I don't see mom because she's working nights. I barely see dad because he's going to work in the morning. So they kind of understand that. So I think that, for all my coaches out there, if you can take your training and relate it to life and relate it to, things that the kids can understand. Hey, if we don't train, if we don't make a deposit, then we can't make a withdrawal.
And just to go off of that, like, that even just prepares the kids for the adversity that life is going to hit them with, because, yes, we're training for the game.
Yeah.
We're training for the game, but also when it comes about life, we're preparing for what's to come in life as well too, because things are going to come up. And so having a way to correlate what we're doing in here only makes their mindset stronger to be able to overcome those things maybe a little bit quicker.
For sure. Yeah. And I think once kids understand, some kids are going to buy in just because, hey, I'm Coach Croc, I'm the head strength coach, I'm in, right? Some kids are going to be on the fence like, this guy's got to show me. And then you're going to have some kids that are like, I don't care who this guy is, where they've been, what they do. Like, I ain't having it. Like, I don't lift weights, right? But like you said, you're preparing them for life and adversity. And I try to echo that as well, like to my male athletes, like, hey, hopefully one day you're going to become husbands and fathers. In doing that, you got to take responsibility for your actions. So when we are setting things up and your teammates aren't setting things up the correct way, you got to use your voice to say, hey, that's not how we do things. We need to do it this way, right? I say the same thing to my female athletes. Ladies, hopefully you all become wives one day if that's what you want to do. Hopefully you have kids if that's what you want to do. But you got to make sure, just like with the males, that your teammates are doing the things that they're supposed to do, because if they don't, it could eventually or essentially affect you, even though you had nothing to do with it, right? And so, like, prime example, hey, I give kids about 90 seconds to get the weight room set up. It don't take long to move a bench, adjust the bar, grab a dumbbell, grab a med ball, grab a kettlebell. But there are still kids that move at such a slow pace that it costs them. So then I relate it to their sport. If me and you are on the same team and you always are 2-3 seconds behind, not just physically, but mentally, well, then when we get on the court, you're probably going to be 2-3 seconds behind. So, hey, yeah, coach drew up this play, but then check. We're going to run this instead. I'm processing that. I'm ready to execute it. You still processing it. Well, guess what? We inbounded the ball. Let's go.
We got to go.
But then you apply that to life, right? If you're filling out a job application and there's certain things you have to attach to it, attach your resume, attach references, and you forget to attach your references, you do everything else you're supposed to do and you submit it. That's an incomplete application. And now all of a sudden that job that you're qualified for doesn't call you. You don't get an interview. You're mad, but it's like you cheated. You skipped steps. You didn't follow through. You didn't do what you were supposed to do. And so I think that relating training is a great way to relate to life and to relate to sport. And again, that's why I try to say, we're preparing you. And, there's probably kids, especially even in college, that don't see it and don't understand it.
Absolutely.
Right. And I just think about 5-10 years from now, I'm going to have a former athlete. Coach Croc, I remember when and like, man, you were so right. Or like, Coach Croc, I remember when you was telling me to not let my teammates slack off and to jump in their butt because it's going to cost us. Like, man, I'm a father now.
Yeah.
And I jump in my kid's butt all the time because I don't want my kid to be in a situation he doesn't need to be in because he's not paying attention. He's not doing what he's supposed to do. And so, normally in this Croc show, man, we do like scenarios, but I want to do an either or with you, right?
Okay.
And this relates, and this is going to hit home, right? And so, would you rather, or, I said either, would you rather have a great boss, but lack on the athletes that you coach and the facilities that you have? Or would you rather flip it and have a okay boss, but have amazing athletes and amazing facilities?
Ooh, okay. I would say have a great boss and have okay athletes.
Yeah.
And I'll say that from a testament of your boss is going to help you out with whatever you need to help whatever you need for the program. And
Yeah.
so when I think about the leadership, yes, you are the leader of the the strength and conditioning program. However, there's certain stipulations that you're going to need outside to make and get the resources that you need for the strength and conditioning program. And having that type of leadership can help you to develop your athletes into what they need to be as well too. And especially, let's say if they're younger, like, yes, they're not going to be 5 stars when they're younger unless you're, Zion Williams or something like
Yeah.
that. But you can develop them tremendously through just simple stuff that you need. And
Yeah.
so I think I would probably rather have the better boss.
For sure. And I'm the same way, man. Like, goes back to like that work-life balance. Like when you have a boss and hey, you have a supervisor, in this case, like a head coach that you enjoy being around, that's knowledgeable, that supports you, it makes life easier because first of all, especially where you're at, and even at we don't recruit the kids. We don't choose the kids that come here, right? At the high school level, at the college level, you recruit kids, but like, you don't know what you got until they get there, right? Go back to my analogy. You can't teach 7 feet. So that 7-footer that can run up and down the court might get there, and all of a sudden you're like, man, this guy's work ethic is terrible. They've been 7 feet their whole life, so they never really had to work. But then now, we're at the college level, that 6'6", 6'8" guy can bang and out hustle and out rebound that 7-foot guy, right? And so I think, not getting caught up in the facilities and the athletes, speaking specifically at the high school level, man, this school, they send guys to college all the time in every sport. They're winning championships in every sport. Their facilities, they got 1 million racks and an indoor, and all of that is great. But you can't stand that head coach.
Oh my gosh.
You're not going to enjoy, in my opinion, you're not going to enjoy that job as much versus you have, I don't even say average, your kids are just there, right? But your boss is like fully supportive. And I got a friend, man, we were talking about, he was looking at other jobs and stuff like that. He had interviews and he was like, I like where I'm at, but I don't want to leave. He was like, but I also want to just continue to climb and move up in this profession. He's like, I don't know. And I was like, well, look at it like this. You have a boss, right? And this is a football strength coach. You have a boss that allowed you to miss work to come to my bachelor party in Florida. Not many head football strength coaches are going to be like, yo, Christian, you need to miss Friday because you're going for a bachelor. Well, we got this 4:00 lift group on a Friday. So like, I need you to be there. And it's like, keeping it all the way real, like you get to that level, most head guys can run a group of 30 by themselves.
For sure.
Right. You probably have, at least football, you probably have GAs. You probably dang sure had got assistants. So it's like
Couple of interns.
So it's like, if you're not there, right, like, come on now. So I think having that boss that you really enjoy, that you enjoy being around and working for, I think is more valuable. Another thing, and I talked about this on the last episode, was like, you can't get caught up in your program's success. Sorry, I should rephrase that. You can't run around beating your chest because you got this great program because it's great this year. Well, then you better be beating your chest if it's not great next year, right? And I gave credit last time. Monty Sparkman said at a clinic, he was talking about how, if you're running around beating your chest because your football team, your basketball team, they went undefeated, won a district, won a state championship, whatever the case may be this year, keep the same energy next year if they go 0-10 or they miss the playoffs or they don't repeat as district champs. And it's like, I think that's what applies so great to, that would you rather, is that like, okay, cool. So you got those great kids, you got the great facilities, right? But then you can't stand your boss with the transfer portal at the collegiate level. Them great kids can be gone after a year, right?
Absolutely.
With the arms race and facilities, that facility that you have could be under construction for 2-3 years. So now you hitched your wagon to great athletes or recruiting great kids and having great facilities, only for the facilities to be under construction, half of those great kids to leave in the transfer portal, and you still work for the same boss, right? So it's like, I personally feel like having the great boss, high school level, having a great athletic director, having a great boys or girls coordinator, having those people is more important than the facilities and the program and things, because those things can go, right? And so,
and another thing, it's just like, if you think about having a great boss, I think that just eliminates a stress factor. If I had a terrible boss and I'm just stressed about my boss and or always just trying to micromanage me or look over my shoulder on a day-to-day basis, or I try to do something, they're not letting me do this, that's going to cause a level of stress that, one, you're not able to bring your best self. And
Yeah.
so because I'm not able to bring my best self as a strength and conditioning coach, I'm doing a disservice to my athletes. And
For
so
sure.
I think that's one of the things that we have to take in consideration is who are we actually getting, who are we actually working for?
Yeah.
Who are we getting into a community with? Because ultimately we need to be aligned in the vision of what we're trying to do and understanding how are we actually going to get there.
Yeah, for sure. So that leads me to my next question. What would it take for you to go back to the high school level?
Ooh,
Right? What would it take? Because I mean, obviously, being at Tech, you know, you're at a place where you're working for somebody that you enjoy. You're living in a city that you want to be in. You're surrounded by a great community. Like, you have so many great things for you. But what would it take if it was like this job came up and I gotta take it, or at least entertain that opportunity? Because I know right now, I know there's been, you know, opportunities that I hit you up about, and you're like, no, I'm good here, and I'm like, hey, I respect that, you know. But what would it take for you to maybe go back to the high school level?
yeah, definitely. One big thing, I would, of course, just want to be a strength and conditioning coach. I think that is one area where, you know, I definitely understand with the high school level, you know, hey, you got a strength and conditioning coach, but they also do basketball. They also do, you know, football or something like that. And so
Yeah.
I definitely understand why. But if it was a perfect world for me, I would just get just into strength and conditioning to be the strength and conditioning coach. I think there's a couple of like logistical things that would probably need to come with it, as far as just like, you know, making sure that I have the resources I need to have a successful strength and conditioning program. I think honestly too, I think it would honestly be cool to have maybe an intern or an assistant strength and conditioning coach, because when you think about, let's say for college, you
Yeah.
know, college, you have athletes who have trained before and you know how to train to some extent. But when you think about middle school or high school, you have a lot more athletes that
Yeah.
you're not actually able to have eyes on all the time. But also who just have really low training ages. And so they need to have those eyes on there. So if I was able to actually have maybe an assistant or maybe an intern just to come in and just get some experience,
Yeah.
to have another set of eyes on the kids, I wouldn't even be mad at going back to high school for that.
No, and that's good to hear, because like I said, like, just having you on, man, and having those experiences and just speaking to those different things, I think that, you know, it's going to help somebody out there maybe make a better and more informed decision, as opposed to getting caught up in the, like, it's a college job and I'm taking it, right? Because not every, you know, job is a good job. Not every opportunity is a good opportunity. And so I just, you know, I appreciate you and your experiences and sharing all of these things. And, you know, like I said, these first 6 episodes have been all high school guys, and now I have a college guy, and it's like, wait, what? But it's like, no, this is somebody that was at the high school level, transitioned to the college level, is giving their perspective and things like that. And, you know, and like I said, like, it's so, like, football is the it leads, you know, it's the tide that raises all boats, right? If your football program is successful, they're going to bring in money, and that basketball program all of a sudden can afford to get that new gym or that new weight room, right? And the girls soccer and the volleyball can afford to, because football racked in $80 million this year, right? And so I'm glad that for this conversation, you're not a football strength coach, right? You're not. And I think that stigma, right, of strength and conditioning often ties into football, right? When you think strength and conditioning, you think football.
Think weight room guy, you
Weight
think
room guy.
muscle, we're gonna lift
Yeah.
as heavy as we can.
Exactly. And so I'm glad that you have this this perspective. I'm glad that you have this opportunity that isn't, you know, the norm, because like you said, like, you played football, you were a football guy, but you're not doing football and you enjoy it. And that just hopefully encourages somebody out there who's maybe looking to go from high school to college, you know, to pursue that opportunity, even though it's not football, or it's not, you know, I grew up playing basketball, but now I got an opportunity to coach volleyball. Well, again, like you said earlier, like, all right, is it about the development of the athlete, or is it about the sport and all of that? My last thing for you what would you say to the Christian that was at Randolph when you were implementing your programming, structuring and organizing your athletes in the group, like all of those things? Like, what advice would you give yourself back when you were at Randolph? Because each year, you learn and you grow. But I think that sometimes we get caught up in like, man, I should have did this, I should have did that.
Yeah.
Or we get caught up in like, you know what, this wasn't as bad as like I thought it was. Oh man, I used to struggle with time management. And then you get somewhere or you get removed from where you were at and you were like, you know what, I was actually pretty good at time management. So like, what would you tell your high school self, now that you've been kind of removed from the high school level and everything?
That's a good question. I would just tell myself not to be so hard on myself when it comes to being a coach, because there's just so much to learn out there. And I'll say this, I'm 27 years old and I don't know anything.
Yeah.
I don't know anything. So I am always looking to learn, and I'm never going to be perfect, but the beauty about life is that we're able to learn until, we pass away.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think, one, make sure I'm not so hard on myself, but also don't get so antsy. And what I mean by that is like, you can be lifting, you can have your kids, you can have your athletes and different things like that. And then like, you have a program to where you're slow cooking it, but now you're just kind of like, nah, bump that, let me just go this.
Yeah.
Like, hey,
full send.
like really just kind of slow things down and make sure like kids are doing things properly.
Correct.
Because overall, that's going to save you in the long run when you start getting to those, heavy front squats, or maybe we're just giving them a little bit more load and they're actually able to like withstand whatever you're trying to do for that. So yeah, I would say just give myself a little bit more grace and just keep everything really simple and slow cook things.
For sure. So, at the end of the podcast, I always allow, the guests to ask me any questions or anything. So like, you have any questions, any scenarios, would you rathers for me? Or
I got one in my head.
Oh,
now.
let me hear it.
What will it take you to go to college again? Ooh,
That's tough.
I done got him.
That is tough. Man. I don't know. That's a good question. So like, backstory, this job that I have now, I wasn't looking for it, and I've told people this before, like personally in my life, I feel like every job and opportunity I've had, especially these past 4 or 5 years, like God's given me. And I feel like if God gave it to me, like nobody can take it away.
Absolutely.
And if it's taken away, it's because God has something better for me. And so with this position that I'm in now, I was chilling, living it up, man. I mean, I was at Randolph, and we had great health insurance,
Man,
and I was
what?
shout out to Blue Cross Blue Shield, man. I was 10 minutes away from work.
You got base access.
Got military base access. Like life was good, and all of a sudden I get a call like, hey, I got your information from a friend and was wondering if you're interested in this job. And I was like, oh, okay. And I came and interviewed for it and everything, and ended up taking the position. And so for me, it would have to be something similar to that, where I feel like, I can't remember the last time I applied for a job. I've been here for over 2 years, and I haven't applied for any other strength and conditioning jobs because I'm not interested in leaving. But it would have to kind of happen similar to that, because I felt like, because I wasn't looking for this opportunity that I have now, it was almost like God was speaking to me to take this opportunity.
Sure.
So if I'm sitting here chilling and, I don't want to leave San Antonio, and so if somebody from UTSA comes and calls me and is wanting to compensate me in the same way and give me a lot of the same freedoms that I have now, I would feel like, okay, that might be my calling. But truth be told, and part of the reason why I'm doing this podcast is just to push the profession of high school strength and conditioning forward. So if that call was to come in a year or two, I would most definitely not even entertain it. But if we're talking about that call comes 10, 12 years from now, well, then I feel like that's a different conversation, because I just look at, the things that I've been able to do. This is my 4th, going on my 5th year at the high school level. 15 years in, I feel like I'm going to be able to have a lot of impact to help grow and network a lot of coaches.
Absolutely.
15 years into something, I feel like I can leave my mark on the profession and everything. 5 years in, not so much. So I think that timing is everything.
Still more work to be done.
Yeah, and because, I got kids now, and I think about, okay, I want to coach my kids when they get to school, but then it's like, yo, you're a strength coach. You can train them anytime.
Anytime.
So then I'm like, yeah, that's true. And then I also think about, like, okay, well, hopefully my kids, my wife's also a middle school coach and I'm a strength coach. So I can't imagine my kids aren't going to play sports. So then I think about, okay, my oldest is going to be 4 this year. So, he'll be in middle school, and I don't want to not knocking anybody, but youth sports is youth sports. But like once you start getting to middle school and getting into high school, so you're talking about my son's got about 10 years. Mm-hmm. Then I start thinking about, okay, so 10 years from now, my son will be a freshman in high school. That could be a time to step away.
Yeah.
Because then if I'm at the college level, right, and again, we're talking about the right opportunity. Well, hey, look, my son's got a game on Friday night. Mm-hmm. My son's got a freshman football game on Thursday at 5. The last group comes in at 4. It's going to take me about 20 minutes. I got to leave at 4:40, right? Not only that, but we're talking about, okay, for me, I've been a head coach for 5 years, like from Kingsville to the 4 years at the high school level, I've been in charge. So I can't imagine taking another position to be an assistant. Mm-hmm. So then I think about, okay, if I'm the head strength coach, I say I got to be somewhere.
Yeah.
I got to be somewhere, right? And so I think that timing is everything. I definitely want to be the dad that, is at my son or daughter's baseball practice, mm-hmm. soccer practice. I'm taking them to swim lessons because, hindsight, when you're at the college level, you don't think about time. You think about your family. When the holidays come around, if you're off, you can go and see them and stuff. But like, you're just kind of working and you're grinding. But when you get married and you have kids, all of a sudden it's like, hey, such and such got a recital, such and such got a game. It's like, oh, but if you're, busy, if you're an assistant strength coach and your boss, and it goes back to like, would you rather a great boss or, great kids? It's like, hey, boss, my son's got a football game at 5:00. Our last lift group is at 5:00. Yeah, to them, it's just freshman football, but to me and my son, and I've talked to too many dads who have kids that are playing, high school or even middle school. Like, I think Howard said it. He was like, my son is a different kid when I'm at his practices. When he's at practice by himself, mom drops him off or mom takes him or our dad drops him off. He is a different kid versus when I am there. And so now my son, again, he's only 3, going to be 4 this year. I'm like, ain't no way in hell I'm not going to be at my son's practices. No way in hell I'm not going to be at my daughter's practices. So I just think about, it has to be the perfect opportunity. Has to be some time where I feel like, okay, they always say never leave a job better than what you found it, right? And so I just think about, if my son's going to high school and I'm 14 years, 15 years in the game, and my son's really passionate about sports and athletics and he's really invested in it, I don't have to be a high school strength coach to be involved, right? In 14, 15 years, I hope I can have a significant impact on the profession. So I just think about, if that phone call comes a year or 2 from now, I'm probably not even, unless you got some crazy money for me and it's in San Antonio because I don't want to leave. But if you're talking about, hey, Coach Croc, we got a assistant or even a head position and we paying $130,000, like, okay, when do you need me to start? We can talk about it, right? But even then, it's kind of like, yeah, but not all money is good money. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? But then if we're talking like, hey, 10, 11 years from now, that same call comes around and maybe the salary isn't that, but it's comparable. Mm-hmm. Okay, hey, when you want me to come in and talk and sit down, So I think that just as life happens and kids grow and things like that, I'll kind of have better decision making, I guess you can say. Now, if you would have asked me that 2-3 years ago, who is it? How much they paying? Mm-hmm. When can I start? Now it's kind of like, no, thanks, but no thanks,
things to think about.
Yeah. And so, and then that'll happen with you too. Like as you get married and you have kids, like, man, that, trying to think of a premier basketball program on the East Coast, West. Man, Virginia got an opening, but I ain't trying to move to Virginia, right? But if you're, 27, Now all of a sudden it's a little bit different versus if you 37 and you've been married for 8-9 years and you got 2-3 kids and you got to pick everybody up and go. Right. And so I think that, when you definitely having a family, it keeps me grounded. It helps me stay focused as far as like, this is what I want to do. So even if UTSA has an opening for assistant football / Olympic strength coach, that's what's up. Cool. You know what I'm saying? 3-4 years ago, well, they got an opening. Who do I know over there? Where's the email? Who can I go? Man, I'm gonna go see him. Right. So I think it would take a lot, especially right now. And I think timing and, I said this on the last episode, I think about as a strength coach, like what's your legacy and how do you define a strength coach's legacy? Right. You can be like a Kyle Dietz and work with championship level teams, but more importantly, provide research and text via triphasic training, which a lot of people use. You can be like Joe Can and talk about the tier system and put that into text. You can be like Triple M Missy and write a book on conditioning, things like that. Like you can have impact that way. You could be somebody that anytime they ask you to present or speak, you're there and you're just helping people along the way. So I think about like my legacy as a strength coach, and it's like, okay, I'm not beating my chest if our boys basketball team went 40-2 this past year. That's them. Like, yeah, they came and they did my training, my program, but that's them. That's Coach Pettis, Coach Miller, Coach Thomas, Coach Walker. That's them, right? And so I just think about like, okay, when I'm done coaching high school, right, what is my legacy going to be? Whether it's hosting an annual clinic like I'm doing, whether it's this podcast, whether it's people DMing me on Twitter, Coach Croc, what do you think about this? Hey, here's my number. Call me. Let's talk. Because it's too hard. There's too much to text. Too much to text, right? So I just think about like legacy and stuff. And I just think about like when I am done doing high school strength and conditioning, whether I go back to college, private sector, professional, whether I go and get into IT because AI is taking all of our jobs, right? Whatever it is that I do, like what is my legacy going to be? And I feel like if my legacy is essentially like cemented, then I would feel more open and be okay with like leaving. But again, I'm not hanging my hat on, oh, we had a 4-star All-American running back that I worked with the past 2 years. No, he was 4 stars before I got here. he had the genetics, he had the work ethic to be that guy before I got here. So I'm not putting him on my resume, right? And here's the deal. Everybody out there applying for jobs, put that boy on your resume. Put that 40-2 basketball record on your resume, because that it highlights the things that it highlights that you've been around winning programs, high level athletes and things like that. But for me, right, I don't profess that like, hey, I'm training basketball year round. My boys went 40. Like, no, they went 40-2. I just was a small part.
On the court?
I didn't make a pass, a shot, or a rebound. None of that. I wasn't on the sideline coaching, nothing. So I just think about my legacy, and I just think about like, my son and daughter, my kids, it being like 2050 and they're pulling up their dad's podcast on YouTube and like, oh, this is my dad, or showing their kids. Like, I just think about those things because, again, I'm not a sport coach. So like Coach Pettis, I think he's like 76-7 in the past 2 years. Like that is a part of his legacy. 3-time district champs, back-to-back state semifinal. That is a part of his resume and his legacy, right? Me, I was here for it. I trained them. Mm-hmm. They came in the weight room 3 times a week in off season. They came in the weight room twice a week in season. They came every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday during the summer, June and July. Everybody shutting it down, football starting, volleyball starting, basketball still here, which is why they have their success. But like they had their success because they work hard and they're invested, they're bought into the culture, they have great coaches, and they also come into the weight room and train. So it's like, for me, I just want to cement my legacy and be, if there is such a thing, a high school strength coach GOAT. There's a lot of them out there. Matter of fact, since it's on my podcast, shout out to, let me see here, Kyle Keese, Red Brock, Who else? Man, there's a lot of coaches. Joey Burgles. Man, I feel Monty Sparkman, John Mitchell. Like those are some.
Elton Cochran.
Sure. Those are 5 names that come up. Felicia Brock. Who else? If you know anybody, let me know and I'll tell you yay or nay. Like those 6 names. Leo Burks. Man, there's a lot of great and these people are in Texas, and I feel like they can coach anywhere in the country and they can coach at the college level. But I just want to be that guy when it's like, hey, we need a strength coach to come speak. You know anybody? I just want my name to be one of those names thrown out there. Or hey, we're trying to build a program. Do you know anybody? My school's been open since 2016. They just created the strength coach position in 2022. So no matter when I leave here, I'm the first ever strength coach, and I've set and laid a foundation. So if somebody wants to know what it is that I did, I would love to go and help, but I want to be that guy. So when I think about somebody's looking for speakers or presenters, somebody's looking for guests on their podcast, I want my name to be thrown up. And I just named those 6 coaches because I think that those coaches are great at what they do. Again, my memory's fleeting me, but there's a lot of great high school strength coaches in Texas. Man, Mark Hoover, right? He's another GOAT, somebody that's pushing the profession forward. Dan Mullins, there's a lot of great strength coaches at the high school level. And so I just want to be one of those guys when they're talking about great strength coaches. I want people to see my work, whether it's my clinics, me speaking at conferences and clinics, me speaking on podcasts, or me posting stuff on social media. I mean, I had a guy hit me up a couple months ago, I think it was back in April, and he was like, Coach Croc, just listen to your interview on the NSCA podcast. Bro, I did that podcast back in 2021. I did that in 2021, and he DM'd me in 2024 about 2 months ago, hey, I just listened to that. Hey, I'm looking at getting started with, middle school program. What do you think about blah, 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 blah? And I responded, and it's just that to me makes me feel great. And that's when go back to the legacy is people listening to this podcast, reaching out and inquiring about hey, what do you think about this? Or what are your thoughts on that? Hey, what do you think I should do? That's what I want to do. I want to be the guy remember when Kobe retired and everybody would go train with him? I want to be like that. I don't want to, shout out to LeBron. I don't want to be necessarily like LeBron, who's one of the greatest basketball players ever. I want to be more like the guy that's mentoring or the guy that's helping people, because that's what makes me feel good. I got an ego, but I don't beat my chest my program's the best thing ever, but I do beat my chest about being organized and my kids being disciplined, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? And so that's kind of what I want for myself in my profession, and it's all over the map, but yeah, those are things that I think about, and those are things that kind of motivate me. So yeah, you got anything else for me? I can go on.
Man, you got it.
So how y'all do? Is this Wreck 'em? Okay, well, Coach Christian Hosley, appreciate you coming on, man. Season 1,
Appreciate you having me.
Episode 7, Wreck 'em Tech, baby.
There we go.